Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football helping us break down the UCLA Bruins with the boys going to camp next week under Chip Kelly. So as spring practice ensues, your thoughts about the Bruins and what are you going to be keeping your eye on?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The practice, Chip Kelly has already made a change in the way they're going to run spring practice. UCLA is one of only a handful of big-time programs across the country where academically they're still on the quarter system. And so, you know, you tend to be running into midterms and finals at times that other schools are not. So they're actually starting spring practice next week on March 6th, and they're going to run it about 3 to 4 days a week for 2 weeks. And then they're going to get 2 weeks off so that the players can take their final exams from the winter quarter and have their spring break before they start the spring quarter. They're going to get that 2 week break, and then they're going to go back to practice after that for about 4 weeks, heading into the spring scrimmage around April 21st, I believe it's going to be. So it's an interesting plan. I haven't seen in all the years of covering college football and covering UCLA, I haven't seen a coach try and do that. So, you know, I give Kelly a nod for trying to help the players out when you know they're having to go through final exams and go through studying and things like that. I know for the basketball team, it's always challenging. They're always taking final exams in a hotel room during the NCAA tournament. Because of being on the quarter system. So I know that that's always strange. You know, I think one of the other things that you're going to be watching is the quarterback play for Devon Modster, because, of course, the prodigy in waiting, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, is not enrolled early. He always intended to finish high school on time, and so he won't be in until summer. So you've got a new offense being installed with Chip Kelly, who will also be the offensive coordinator. He will be running his own offensive plays and be calling his own plays during the games. And so you're going to have Devon Modster in kind of getting a bit of a head start over Thompson-Robinson, who, you know, everyone's been waiting for. See what Modster can do with the new plays. He's well suited to a Kelly offense. He can sprint out well. He doesn't necessarily have the arm that DTR does, but he does have the mobility. So that'll be interesting. And then, of course, you know, as we've been talking about what seems like endlessly UCLA, the offensive line. They did not get a big haul recruiting wise, and spring wise. You're basically going with what you've got left over from last year. You know, Scott Quessenberry is moving on to the NFL, and so you've got to go with what you've got left over. Chris Murray will be coming in the summer, but during the spring, it'll be interesting to see how well the players that are there adapt, because I think that'll be a telltale sign going forward if any of the incoming freshmen are going to have a shot of immediate playing time. So it'll be interesting. It'll be really a chance to see how these guys adapt to something completely different than what they've done over their 2, 3, or even 4 years at UCLA to this point.
Modster coming off that sporadic performance in the bowl game, big plays in the first half, most notably 21 of 34, 295 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and they certainly needed him the previous week or the previous game to make postseason play, where he put up almost a perfect 14 for 18, or at least perfect statistically. 14 of 18 for $191 against Cal in that win to become bowl eligible. Chip Kelly, we know, I have to imagine he can't wait, Tony, to get on the field, especially with his offense, and get his hands on the personnel and start to make some of his moves with the quarterback position in particular. You've done a little bit of digging in regards to some of his thoughts about handling spring practice and the coaching staff. So I'm going to leave it carte blanche for you to take it from here in regards to any direction you want to go to fill us in on UCLA spring practice.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we talked about at the top of this, is you have a new head coach, you bring in almost an entirely new staff. There are a couple of holdovers on offense. Jimmy Doherty, the wide receiver coach, will be back. Deshaun Foster, the running back coach, will be back. But for the most part, it's a pretty substantial overhaul of the coaching staff. And in digging through Chip Kelly's past and doing a little bit of homework, it's interesting. There was a coaching clinic manual put out for the Nike Coaches Clinic in 2011. And a new head coach by the name of, or relatively new head coach at the time, by the name of Chip Kelly, wrote an entire chapter about efficient use of practice time and how it relates to assistant coaches. And it was pretty lengthy, actually. It's good 21 pages worth of material in here on the thoughts of Chip Kelly and how to use coaches and so on. But since there are so many new coaches and a lot of them have experience under him, but guys like, Justin Fry and Derek Sage and certainly the holdovers don't have any experience coaching with Kelly. And I thought it was kind of interesting. He said one of the things that he always wants coaches to do is not so much be on the field coaching the players that are, we'll use the offensive line as an example. Yes, he wants them coaching the offensive line, but he also wants them standing back on the sidelines with the offensive linemen who are not in there running that particular drill. And he can be in there blowing his whistle and yelling from the sidelines, but he wants his coaches in there talking to the guys who are not in there, coaching them, teaching them up, showing them what's happening and what should be happening, and talking them through the mistakes instead of necessarily being the guy who's in the middle of the offensive line blowing his whistle and yelling at everybody. He wants everything to be a teaching moment during practice, and that includes just being there with the players who are watching the drills and being on the sidelines and helping them. He said, the coach has to be responsible for teaching everything the player does. One of his quotes, and I thought this was interesting because it breaks it down to the most specific. He said, if a player does not do the stretch drill correctly or he does the wrong technique, he learned it from his coach because the coach let him get away with it. He did it because the coach didn't think it was important enough to change it. Every drill we're going to do, our coaches are going to coach it for success. If the conditioning coach thinks stretching is important, if he thinks it's important enough that we do it, then we're going to do it to our fullest capacity. If you accept it, expect it. If you accept a player going 8 yards when he's supposed to go 10, it's going to happen during a game as well. And so it was interesting, just his philosophy of the coaches have to take responsibility for everything the players do. If a player does something wrong, the first responsibility goes back to the coach, not teaching them how to do it correctly.
Tony, this is a core common theme that I hear now from Chip Kelly, and I've heard it from a number of very successful coaches in the modern era. And that's doing exactly what you're talking about there, taking ownership of the player's ability to learn and the end result of their learning, rather than saying maybe the old school way, I'm the coach, I have a program, we've got a system, you better learn it. We teach one way, here it is, get on board, or if you're not able to pick it up, too bad, we move on. Versus, I've heard this now from a number of successful coaches, again, modern coaches, to say, hey, the onus is on us to find a way to get through to you, to find your best learning capacity, your best learning model, and try to teach you as best we can. And if it doesn't work the first time, it's probably on us. And we're going to find a way to instruct and teach to where you can understand.
One of the things you and I talked about, I think, back when we spoke after his press conference, his introductory press conference, was that we had the chance to ask him what it was going to be like with someone else's players that weren't necessarily all his recruits. And his point to what you say was, from here on out, they're all my guys. all of them. I don't want any of them to feel like, you know what, you learned a different way than what I like to teach. So therefore, you don't have as good of a chance of success with me. To your point that you just made, he told us it's my job to make sure that they are our guys. We're going to help you get to where we need you to be. In other words, if you don't get it the first time, we're going to find another way to make it work for you. And therefore, everybody buys into the system. He pointed out in this thing from 2011 that every moment of practice is accounted for, that he will have a sheet with every drill they're going to do in every time increment, whether it's stretching or whether it's passing drills. He believes in going full speed in all the drills, first team offense versus first team defense, and going full speed as often as possible, but having all of the time accounted for. And, you're a sports historian yourself. I couldn't help but think back to the little 3x5 index cards that Coach Wooden used to have at his practices, where it would say from 3 to 3:15, you do this. From 3:16 to 3:25, you do this. And that's what he lays out in this chapter that he wrote, almost 7 years ago. So it'll be fascinating to see. It's a culture shift for UCLA. It is a culture shift for the football program. I think this goes well beyond just a coaching change for UCLA. The expectations are high, but not unreasonable. I think if you read the UCLA fan boards and the different posts and have conversations with people, they want to be competitive. And they're confident that Kelly will be competitive. From the UCLA administrative standpoint, they want excitement back in the program. They want there to be a buzz about the program. And I know, having exchanged some messages with some folks in the administration, season ticket sales went up significantly within the first month after Kelly was hired. So there is that buzz, and they're looking for a long-term culture shift, not just a new football coach.